This episode contains references to themes that some listeners may find disturbing, triggering, or uncomfortable.
I know. Oh, okay. God.
There's a little bit of domestics going on here. Seems to be some problems with the talent and the producer.
No, I know, because I'm not going to...
Yeah, I get what you're
The
saying.
talent is rebelling and the producer is realising that perhaps...
Jeremiah, we get it.
he
You
was
got a
in the
deep
wrong.
voice, all right? We don't need to hear you talk anymore. Hello and welcome. You are listening to Tell Them, a brand new podcast talking all things contemporary culture by black and brown artists, produced by Tamasha Theatre Company and supported by the People Dem at Transmission Roundhouse. My name is Tobi Kyeremateng and I'm the host for season 1. On today's episode, I'm joined by writer and performer Rumi Woolf, poet Jeremiah SugarJ Brown and performance artist Louisa Robbin. I'm really excited to be talking with them about their practice. So let's get straight into it.
Yeah, reach out to me.
Hey everyone!
Hey.
How's it going? How's everyone doing?
I'm very well.
I'm okay.
And Jeremiah, we don't care about how you're doing.
Wow.
So,
It's
do you
fine.
want to all go around and introduce yourselves, talk about who you are, what you're doing, make it good, make it snappy, make it quick. Louisa, go.
Okay, quick. Hi, I'm Lou. I make stuff. I make performance. I write songs and sing them. I make live art, which is that weird in-between stuff that's not quite theatre, not quite dance, not quite music. And I love it because it doesn't have walls. I also make zines and I'm kind of obsessed with doing that at the moment.
I write at the moment and also make performances. At the moment, I'm kind of exploring the nature of human being and this idea of humanity having a common thread that's kind of embedded in our unconscious and utilising that to create participatory action that breaks the borders between socio-political identities.
God damn.
I'm Jeremiah. I'm a writer and performer and I am currently creating Little Rum with Grandma, which is the debut solo show. I write poems and stuff as well.
Awesome. Thanks for coming in, guys. Jeremiah, what are you seeing this week?
I am procrastinating with Madeleine McCann, the Netflix
Oh,
thing.
gosh.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I personally just feel like that whole situation is very, very, very just
Interesting.
interesting is the fantastic word. Because there's just so many holes, so many problems that I have. You're there, you're on holiday, and instead of, enjoying the holiday with your children, as most people who go on holiday with their children do, you've decided to leave your children in an unlocked bedroom and, gone out for drinks with the lads. I don't understand. I don't get it. At some points, I felt guilty for being so judgmental. But then I realised I wouldn't even leave my brothers at home with the door unlocked and go down the road. So it's just a bit mad.
What's the
Yeah.
documentary saying? Because I haven't watched it yet, but I've been seeing the hot takes about it as well.
So, it's very scenic. It's very, very scenic.
Nice gowns, beautiful gowns.
No, I think it's a good reminder because I think I'm only on the first few episodes, but you forget like how big the Madeleine McCann story was and the entire world was invested in it. But you also realize that the documentary does a good job of dissecting the fact that there's just bare shady things going on here, from the fact that when it started, the police it was a small town police, so there was a lot of mistakes made on that front. And then there's holes in the McCann's story. Then there's, just strange thing about the types of people that were around. And then you start to look into the McCanns more and you're just like, this is a bit weird. So it does a good job of sort of slowly kind of unraveling all of that.
Because it's 8 episodes, isn't it?
Very slowly.
Are they all an hour?
Yeah, so my mum came in today whilst I was
Louise was
watching
just
it.
like,
Really, that's too much of my time. We've been talking about this for years.
It's mad. So she came in and she was like, "Oh, you're watching the Madeleine McCann thing," and I was like, "Yeah, I'm on episode 2." And I was like, I then moved the mouse and I realized I'm not on episode 2. I've still got 20 minutes left of episode 1. So it's very long, which I don't know whether that's good or bad for procrastination, but it is definitely what it is.
I think it's good if they're like saying stuff, because like you just said, Lou, like we've been talking about it for years. Like it's been going on. So if they are unraveling the years of stuff, because the search has been going on for years as well, then it kind of makes sense to have a series. But if they're just like showing you the algarve and being like, come on holiday here, but also this bad thing happened too.
Come on holiday, lock your doors. That's the message.
No tea, no shade.
That is the biggest mood.
Lou, what have you seen in the news?
So I read something that actually is from 2017, because I clearly live in the past where it's safe. So I read something from 2017, which is basically about how black women statistically, from the Nielsen report in 2017, are the most influential women at the moment.
Obviously.
Yeah. However, it's nice to see that it's been recognised in terms of algorithms, even though I don't quite understand what they do. All I know is that I feel like people are spying on me. But I don't mind it. It's good to celebrate myself. I just hope that they don't use it, to take money from these well-deserving black women.
How do you think they are going to use it? Because there's obviously a reason that this report was made.
Marketing. If I'm a YouTuber and I'm this YouTuber, I don't know, I do skincare. And I said, okay, cool, let's start making these face masks with turmeric, because turmeric in my culture is this, I don't know, this kind of thing. And it starts to pop off. Then they can go and speak to brands and be like, I think turmeric is going to be the next big thing. Consultants and stuff like that can go into, and then next thing you know, everyone's making money off turmeric. Like, we ain't got it in our kitchens. That's what's going to happen.
True. Rumi, what have you seen that's been interesting?
So I saw a story about Peppa Pig, and
hold tight, Peppa.
So Peppa Pig on YouTube, she's basically, there's this evil demonic creature called Momo that slowly infiltrates the imagery around Peppa Pig. So as you watch Peppa Pig, Momo will appear, and Momo will tell the children to slit their wrists, kill their parents. And this is all intersected with a fun-loving pig. So I found the whole thing, quite a mirror to our times.
If you've seen the picture of Momo, it's scary. Like, I saw it and then I every time I closed my eyes, I kept seeing it. Like, it's real.
But she has her own beauty in her own way. Like, she kind of flares up an image that children maybe feel but don't see enough of.
But imagine, like, you're setting your kids down and you're like, oh, here, like, just watch some Peppa Pig while I go, like, make dinner or something. And they're being told to, like, gas you in your sleep. Like, who do you trust out here? If you can't trust Peppa Pig, who can you trust?
We could never trust Peppa Pig. She's very rude.
But then it opens the question of why have children?
This escalated very quickly.
But we know, like, Peppa Pig is feisty anyway. Like, do you know what I mean? Like,
she's been banned in China as well.
She's been banned?
Yeah, for scoopish behaviour. So she imitates different people, and the Chinese government thinks that might encourage bad behaviour.
That makes sense. Because if you saw the episode where she hung up on her friend because she couldn't whistle, like...
She was so popular, though, in China that they had to make alternative pig-related programmes for children.
That's amazing.
And apparently there's been some controversy over Peppa Pig using the word fireman in a kind of sexism row.
Fireman.
Yes, because it's got the word men in.
Yeah. It's a pig. Like, it's a show about a family of pigs. And I get it, anyone can be a fire person.
Yeah. I've been using the word firefighter for a really long time. Is that just me? Am I the only person doing that?
That is a good... I don't know why... I don't know why I just...
You're very aware and using the correct language before all the rest of us.
No, that makes sense because, I just
but
said fire person.
But it does sound hilarious. Firefighter. Boy, it sounds like Power Rangers. I think that's it.
I thought it might have been fire people. But
Yeah, I did say fire person, but then anyway, you all went to see The Space Between Things by Phoebe Boswell at Autograph ABP. Chat to me.
one of the interesting things about the exhibition is it looks at diasporic narratives, so people being split from their homelands. And in contemporary society, we have this idea that associates to a very specific person, that it isn't something that's a universal ideal or experience of humanity, but it's very specific to immigrants. And one of the things that she shows is kind of the universality of that process of migration. So there's like her body in between the ocean and the beach. In that sense, it shows that splitting of her from her homeland going to another area and then being caught in the space in between those two places, which I found quite powerful. And also this idea of splitting or cleaving or breaking is really important when you think about diasporic narratives, because, I mean, if you think about, for example, refugees, their identity is formed in that country. And then when they're displaced from that country, their identity is in some sense lost, because they've lost the places in which their identity was formed. And that kind of creates a trauma around who they think they are. And also I think the piece is interesting just because it looks at the way that everything migrates. So, you know, words migrate off a page into your mind. So, yeah, I found that interesting.
Yeah, I think the point on diaspora is really interesting, because I went to see it, and I struggled to connect with it. So I think I went into the space. And so now, even as you're talking about her when she's on the beach and the water, and kind of seeing that as sort of being stuck between two lands, I was asking, I was like, why is she there by herself and not connecting to it on that way? But I think that the sort of the conversation around identity and seeing it and framing it in that way is really interesting, because I think presently there's a lot of us who have diasporic histories in a sense, or that's a part of who we are, and that sense of identity and belonging to different places or multiple places. I think we're discovering what it means to call somewhere home, and I think we're particularly, I feel like the generation that I'm a part of is sort of figuring out what home means and sort of being dissatisfied with a sense of home that you've kind of grown up with, and sort of reaching for identities in other aspects of yourself, and also not finding a complete home there as well. And I think that whole discussion is quite interesting, and not seeing that as a individual thing, but because it's happening to so many of the people that I know, or the relationships that I haven't even necessarily thought of it as an individual sort of thing. It's been something that I know that so many people are experiencing.
So why do you think you struggle to relate to it? Like when you first went in that space, when you first saw it, what do you think was the disconnect for you?
Part of it was the time that I went in. I'd been doing stuff, I'd been working all day, and then I was going to this exhibition before I went to another event. So I was tired, and my mind was moving. So I wasn't in a space where I was like, okay, cool, let me try and, I wasn't prepped. There was a lot of it that was quite shocking. And I think sometimes when you're not ready for that, or you're not anticipating that, or you're not in a mindset where you're like, okay, let me try and onboard everything in this situation, that almost switched me off more. So almost like, and then I wasn't able to necessarily engage. So the downstairs part of the exhibition, I was really able to engage with. The drawings were drawn onto the actual building and was a part of the building. It was beautiful, but at the same time, a lot of the images were shocking, but I think I was able to access that. And then I went upstairs, and there's a video, and there's a lot of her eye operation, and there's images of her looking in a lot of pain, and it wasn't something where I was like, okay, let me try and understand and figure this out. It was like, this is a lot, this is a bit much.
I'm thinking a lot about images of pain and how we kind of respond to them, because naturally a lot of us can empathise very easily with pain, but I understand what you mean about that disconnect, because sometimes it's almost safer to disconnect from something before actually like allowing yourself to actually feel something and embrace something, and then have to walk around. I'm the kind of person, if I see a piece of art and it touches me, I will literally carry it for the rest of my day. I'll be thinking about it. It'll be like inside me. And actually, I think it's nice to see something and observe it as this is important and not carry it on board. In the terms of like, I think the images that I did see have kind of like scratched in my mind, but like, and I use the word scratched very specifically because they felt very, very violent. I think it's important though that they are violent, because I don't think in terms of migration and the way we look at it now, I think actually often it's quite a violent and aggressive situation to be in. And some of the refugees that I've met and that I've known and come to know very well have had to witness a lot of painful, aggressive and violent stuff. And I think when you're making an exhibition about those themes, it's important to have them there. Instead of shying away from it, instead of wrapping it up in a pretty bow in a bite-sized chunk. Actually, like, this, it's hard, and I appreciate that it was a hard experience. Sometimes you need to kind of remove yourself from work like that, because it's not everyday pain, you know.
Yeah, I feel like there's a question as I think about just violent images and how much we're exposed to that. So just from a basic, in terms of the media that we consume and the TV programs that are available, they're very violent. One thing now is that there's real life, actual violence that happens, that you can literally just be going about your day and a tragedy happens and it's on your phone and you don't read a message properly and you're watching something that's genuinely traumatic. That's a reality that I feel like hasn't sort of existed in that accessibility kind of way. And then there's sort of art as well, and how do you reflect the real life and the reality of things that have happened, and how do you present that? And then how do you, as a viewer or an experiencer or whatever you want to call it, how do you decide what you know when you go to watch it, and what are you taking on board? Because like yourself, you know, if when I see things, I take them into my body, and there's videos that I've tried to avoid before, and then I've just been chilling with my boy and like he's played the video and I've got like the violence in my body, and like it's still something that sticks with me months, years down the line. Like it's in my body. So I think that's an interesting sort of, that's something that I think about. And I think with art as well is that question of, and then you as a person experiencing it, what do you decide to allow yourself to open up to?
I feel like there's something really important in what you said about pain, the way that, you know, sometimes you don't need to carry things in your body, but that these things have importance. There's a psychological phenomenon, I think it's called Electrophilia, but I could be wrong. And there's a psychoanalyst called Donald Kalshed who talks about this. And basically what happens is when you experience a traumatic event, your brain, in order to preserve itself and to preserve the ego, will separate the thought and the image attached to the memory from the emotion. And so often when you walk into these highly kind of traumatic spaces, particularly with this like art exhibition, you have already been preconditioned in response to your own traumatic histories to shut down emotion. Engaging with it is far too visceral, and it contradicts your mechanisms of survival. And also there was this idea that you spoke about that you, when you experience a piece of artwork, you know, you feel the violence in your body, or when you witness violence, you witness it in your body. I find that quite interesting, because if we kind of look at where we live and kind of our current context, it's not that violent. I mean, we do experience violence, but in terms of human history, or just in terms of our kind of political location in the world, we don't experience as much violence as there are in so many other parts of the world, and yet we experience the feeling of violence, or we react to it in such a visceral way. And I kind of wonder whether that's related to this idea of like transgenerational trauma. There's this theory called epigenetics, which looks at this idea that when you have a traumatic encounter, it causes a gene mutation, and you pass that gene mutation on, and that carries itself through the lineage and therefore manifests within the body itself. So actually there's something quite profound that occurs when we witness violence, and that is the triggering of our ancestral pain into a very visceral and very difficult experience to process.
Sorry, I just wanted to bring up something I heard on Rick and Morty. And I think it was the daughter of Summer on Rick and Morty once said, I think the mother had just experienced some sort of trauma or was bringing up a trauma that happened in her childhood. And Summer said, my generation gets traumatized for breakfast. And that always stuck with me because we're not in anywhere, we're not in a violent context at all, no. But it's in our face constantly. Even like when you said with your friend, like even when you try to avoid it, it just comes your way. Like I don't think we should navigate the world without viewing it. I don't think we should block it out because we need to see it, to see that these things are happening. But at the same time, there has to be some sort of way to protect ourselves. And that's what I wonder, like, how do we do that?
I think that leads on really nicely to what I wanted to talk about in this episode, because, you know, you're all makers of work, largely autobiographical work. And I think there's a kind of subtle but growing conversation within the industry about the way that Black and brown artists make work, especially autobiographical work in relation to trauma, and trying to think about like where this comes from, and if there's a pressure to making this work, or if there's an expectation, or if it's just so deeply rooted in a lot of our history, essentially as a people, that is what we naturally go to. But also just wanted to talk about when you are talking about trauma and you're making this kind of work, especially if you're performing it again and again and again, what that does to us as people as well, and what that does to our bodies. So I'm really interested to hear from all of you about your process of making this kind of work, and I guess the things that you think about or consider or haven't actually considered when it comes to putting your work together.
I think sometimes there can be, I don't know if it's pressure or expectation, but feeling like I can't make art for the sake of making art. When you're leaning into that, it means that you lean into the things that are realist, the things that have been most difficult for you, or you lean into the things that maybe people aren't talking about. I write loads of stuff, but the things that I decide to maybe delve into are where I feel like the challenges or the deeper sort of personal conflict is.
I think there's a pressure, always, we all know it, as Black people, I'm speaking about Black people because I am Black, to do things and make them pop. When I accidentally became an artist,
As we all do,
I honestly, my mum does not know what I do. Like, she doesn't know. I'm just like, yeah, performance, working on a performance. She does not know. The reason she does not know is because she has raised me, a West African woman, has raised me to be the type of person who goes into something and works extremely, extremely hard. So when I go into my own artwork, I do go into it and I work extremely hard, but her view of what hard work is very narrow. So art cannot be hard work. And so I think when you go into a creative space as someone who I didn't go and study some sort of performance degree or whatever, someone who just makes something and performs something, I think there's a massive pressure from the art world, but also from our world as Black and brown people, to just kind of like make it something spectacular, because it can't be anything less, because I'm already pushing it. Do you know what I mean? There's that.
Okay, when you do it for yourself and you make something for yourself, that's great. But then what happens next in terms of if this is now being performed at a wider audience, do we sometimes have to start thinking about how are we going to protect ourselves when this sort of goes on more? And I think that's something that I feel like the way that we talk about art sometimes and that we engage with it, we don't necessarily put the artist first in terms of, okay, this show is great, but how can we make sure that this show is also great by making sure that the artist is looked after and that the artist is safe? And I think there's a lot of glamorization about, you know, just we fall in love with artists that have had struggles and you know, just been deeply troubled and like gone through just been in dark places. And I think there's almost sometimes a glamorization of that. And I think it's really important to have those honest conversations about what it's like to perform certain types of work, so that it's not glamorous, so that it's real, and so that we can have better conversations about, you know, the artist exists here as well, and the artist has to do this over and over again, and like, how do we look after ourselves?
Thinking about like my own work, about my own trauma, I make work about my mental health. It's really ouchy, and having to perform it every time, you end up putting yourself in this really weird cycle. You make something and you make it, like when I make something, I make it for myself. I'm a very selfish artist. I'll make it so that it's pretty and nice, but it's not for anyone but me. And so when I made this work, I made it because I was in a lot of pain and I just needed to express it in a way that was safe, as opposed to doing it in an unsafe way. And so when I performed it the first time, I just had the release, the catharsis. It's all good, fine. But then comes, okay, so you made something and it's nice. So maybe you should share it because people will connect with it. Yay, great, love it. Go and take it somewhere. And I don't know, you just learn each time. Each time you learn something, you learn actually making work about your mental health is to a detriment of your mental health. Making DIY work as a live artist, a lot of the stuff that we do is extremely, oh, come and join this residency. We've got no budget. Put some stuff together and make a show. So everything is very like, you're doing everything yourself. You're scraping at the edges of yourself to make a piece of work. And then the audience receive it. Maybe they enjoy it. Maybe they connect to it. But you no longer feel like you're there. You feel like you're deep inside yourself, beating yourself up. That is what it has felt like for me personally. I feel like I made a show and I had to run inside myself and just camp out because I've made something that really hurts me.
What I found really interesting about what you're both saying is for me, basically when I was 11, I always had this image of me being a prostitute. It was always something I wanted to do. It never happened and we never know. But there is a very strong element. I remember watching a documentary about prostitution and there was like the madame of the brothel. I love using that word. Yes, she said the best prostitutes will always give their soul when they are with these men. And it is the most vulnerable place that you can go to in your experience as a human being. And I think for me, I just did a show recently and I had to do this very intense internal dancing. And the first time I did it, I felt this like visceral release of emotion that had been suppressed for so long. But then after the 5th time of doing it, it felt like Dance Monkey Dance. And I felt like the audience was almost sitting at me like eyes with open mouths ready to eat me. Like they were hungry for my soul, for my interiority. And I felt unbelievably vulnerable. And I think that's the point at which you really regress into the question that you stated of like, everyone's there, everyone's doing everything, but you know you're not there on some level. You make yourself absent. I think there's this, and I think almost within myself, there was a desire to self-destruct that I hadn't accepted, that this act of reliving and constantly going through something and embodying it was a way of destroying or splitting myself apart. And I also think that those are the moments that I feel the most alive, but they are the moments that also simultaneously destroy me. And I'm always caught in the in-between. Mm-hmm. I can never say that there's a singular solution to that. As a performer, I just know that I'm in between self-destruction and in between ecstasy every time I do it. I think the experience as a writer is one of like limitlessness. In a sense, when I perform, I have to get myself into a certain state of consciousness. Whereas I think with writing, because you're so divorced from people, you're doing it on your own, there is just this limitless freedom in the sense that you feel nobody's watching you. You feel totally free in that sense. Things you can't say out loud, you can always put down in a text. And they're like really fun ways of articulating the feelings that you don't want to accept. There isn't a recreation or reliving of the trauma. You sort of externalize it in a sense once to create some text, and you maybe relive it when you, I don't know, engage with it again, either you're direct, when I've kind of working with the performers, or when I'm like rereading it or watching it, then I go back into that space. A lot of my text, I can write down notes and stuff, but working on a laptop is quite an interesting space because in a way it's purely psychological. Your hand is not producing the word itself. The distance between it creates this whole other world, and it can create this purity, and also the way that it's so separate from you. It isn't your handwriting. It's quite clinical, and that clinical aspect of it makes you feel, in a sense, removed from it, but also then it gives it a stronger power because you feel as if, because it's removed from you, it's almost coming from the world and not just from you.
Do any of you think about your audience when it comes to making this kind of work in relation to, I guess, the autobiographical trauma and looking after yourselves, but do you think about the audience experience around that as well? Not even just in a case of who is this for, but I guess what do you want people to feel leaving this?
I think for me, I'm definitely like come and experience this with me, but I get this tiny bit of fear every single time I perform that last work, called To Care. Every single time I get this fear that I've hurt someone. And every single time I go into a venue, I say, please give people a trigger warning. And I think it's only been on 2 occasions out of the 6 times that's happened. So every single time I leave or finish performing, I get a deep fear that I've hurt someone, or that I've allowed someone to think in a similar way to me, because in the show it's basically me kind of going over my thoughts, my negative thoughts. So I fear that I've let someone kind of spiral. And it wasn't the case, and I'm grateful for that, but there's always that fear that it's actually, maybe I've done something to harm you. Maybe this show is not only harmful for me, but it's harmful for you. Maybe I've unlocked something. If this is emotional for me and you're connecting to it, maybe I've unlocked something. Maybe I've allowed you to start thinking about it the way you think. Maybe I've set you on this thing of like, oh, wow, I speak to myself really, really mean. And then instead of you being compassionate, because it was only until recently that I had started to bring that into the show. Maybe you leave with that sense of, oh, I'm horrible to myself. And instead of being compassionate, walking away and being like, I should really stop that. And allowing that to then be a critical voice on top of your already critical voice.
So I'm doing a performance piece at the moment, and I call it Anatomy of War. And it's a year-long durational performance. And I do it every day for a year, or at least I try to. Basically, I take a person each day. It can be anyone. I could find them on the street. They could be somebody that I love deeply, or they could be, someone that I know a little bit, but not that much. And I basically lie down on the floor. So, I can do it in different places. I'm pretty happy to do it anywhere. But I like to do it in people's houses. So if people are willing to take me to their house or any kind of intimate or private space, it's quite interesting to do it in non-intimate spaces. But I lie down, I ask the person to put their head on my lap, and my legs are split open, and in between my legs they curl up into a fetal position. I ask them to try and go to sleep. After that, I then sit down in a cross-leg position with them sitting down parallel, and I put my hand on their heart and they do the same, and we look into each other's eyes for an extended period of time. I take out a piece of paper that has a question, and the question is, what is the most intimate thing you want to do with me? The piece of paper tells them to write that down and then rip the piece of paper up, and then I ask them to perform the action. And this whole process for me is entirely about the audience. For me, it is about compassion in its purest sense, because when I ask you what is the most intimate thing you want to do with me, that question is, what do you need from another human body? That question isn't really about me. It's about your needs. And in that sense, I sacrifice myself totally to the will of somebody else. So when I ask them that question, it really is a process of me submitting to their desire, and in that sense breaking the border between our external bodies, because I become a space within them. I remember once I did it, and the person that I did it with, she'd seen one of my performance pieces that I'd done. She was actually at my university with me, and she said to me, she wrote this really long thing, and then when I asked her to perform the action, she was a bit nervous, and she decided to tell me that basically one of my other performance pieces, which was about trauma, had basically triggered her to realize that in her work she was confronting her rapist. And she would always paint in red, and she never realized that she was painting in red because it was the color of blood. And she also never realized that every time she painted these abstract paintings, there was the form of a man emerging. And it was through that other piece that I'd done that she'd realized that this trauma was working itself into everything that she was doing. It felt as if she'd knitted herself into my body, and what she'd expressed to me could never leave me. It had fundamentally become part of me. In that sense, maybe I've been on that side of being, I guess, hurt, but not by a totally different context. It's a piece that makes me want to kind of scream and become very angry afterwards. I can only describe it like a wave going in and out. You know, when the wave pushes out to consume the land, it then regresses back into an almost fetal position and recoils. And that's the exact process I get when I make this performance piece.
Yeah, I do think about the audience, but it's not just because of myself. So a lot of my show, it's about my nan. There's a lot of stories and information and things that she shared with me. So when I think about doing it and putting it in front of an audience, there's more than just myself there as well. It's more than just my story. And I think there is something about Black trauma. I'm just very aware of, okay, if this is going to be here, if I'm going to put this in, why is it here? Like, it needs to be justified for me. And it sometimes there's a lot of stuff that I've left out of the show because I felt like this is a part of my nan's story, or this is something that she's experienced and she's been through. What does it provide for the audience? I have that relationship. I think there's something to be said about, we write art, we create art, not everything is to be shared. And I think for me, there's definitely the process of, cool, I can write this, I can create something, and then the editing process for me is real. And then what do I decide to share? What do I decide to keep in? What do I decide to also provide for the audience? You know, I think the audience is important, and I don't sort of subscribe to the idea of like, oh, it's just for me and that's why I'm performing it. And I never thought about the audience at any point, because I feel like, okay, cool, if it's for you, like do that work and do that process. But as soon as you begin to, when it becomes like, this is now to be performed and this is now to be put on a stage, I think sometimes I know for me personally, I feel like I've threatened to do myself a disservice, because I've been in situations where I've given things to audiences and they've not taken care of it, and I felt hurt.
When it comes to making this kind of work, or when you're in the process or in the act of making this work, how do you protect yourself?
So some things that I do that I didn't do before, I like to be really independent sometimes, and like just go in and just be like, yep, I'm here. Yeah, I'm ready to do the job. So I now bring friends with me, or I'll make sure I'll be like, hey, thank you for this opportunity. Do you have anything in the budget so that I can bring someone to assist me with this? I ask for that now because it does make things a lot easier for me. I wrote a self-care manual that I share with the said assistant. Basically just lists of things that I might need before I perform. I think asking for help is just really important. I think that's the biggest learn, asking for help and actually thinking about yourself and who you are as a performer. What do you need in place? What kind of foods do you need to eat? Do you need time to exercise? Do you need time to decompress?
I'm curious to know how this person helps you.
Okay, so Danny is really great and helps me in several ways, actually helping me physically setting up stuff, sometimes helping me get a meal. sometimes helping me get hot drinks, sometimes making sure that I've got all my stuff packed after the show. Do I have everything I need to shower? Where is that? Am I going to be able to just come out of the door and not have to interact with anyone? The show that I perform is quite messy, so I've got a lot of oils and stuff like that. So making sure that I've got stuff to like even safely get from where I've performed to a shower. Let me tell you a story. So in this show, I perform nude. Yes, I said it, nude. And I performed it in Glasgow at a festival called Buzzcut. Great. Very like warm, lovely festival. But it's in the venue that I was in is like a community centre. They did not have any showers. So a reminder, I am nude. I am covered in coconut oil, shea butter, lard, oils. I'm dripping, naked, dripping, covered in glitter as well at this point as well. Come out of this performance, I tell the volunteer, because I don't have any assistants, please hold this disabled Lou. I need to get in there. Please tell me why. I've come out of my show and this wonderful, sweet old auntie is with her walking stick, slowly traipsing her way into the bathroom. She looks me up and down, head to toe, and she said, "Sorry, darling," and goes into the bathroom. And she takes, 4 minutes. I swear to you, it was a 4 whole minutes standing there, nipples to the wind. Everything's out, waiting for the bathroom.
She said, "Sorry, darling."
She said, "Sorry, darling."
Right.
I went and I had to say, "It's okay, auntie," because I'm not disrespectful. Yes, I'm naked, but I'm not disrespectful.
Sorry.
I've never... And so from there, I then began to implement a structure.
I very much separate what is my work and then what I decide to share. There's levels of sharing for me. There's things that I've written that are for myself. There's things that I've written that I've shared with other people and got feedback and edited and whatever, but I'm never going to publish or put it anywhere. And then there's things I've written that I've put out that I perform. I think it's a protection for myself in knowing that it's okay to keep things for myself. It's okay as an artist to have things that belong to you. Like it's okay if your entire existence as an artist doesn't mean that you share everything that you make as an artist. And even the stuff that is good enough to be shared doesn't have to be shared. It's your decision as to whether it's shared and as to whether other people get to see it or experience it or not. And I feel like that decision is a big part of protecting myself as an artist and giving myself permission to say like, no. I think in regards to my show, as you were talking, I was like, the idea of doing my show by myself is very hilarious. And so I think I call it my show, but like whenever I'm talking about it, I say we and like, oh yeah, we're doing this and we're doing that. And people are like, oh, like how many people are in it? And I'm like, oh, it's just me on stage, but my director Maya and producer Malachi. And I think that's really important for me, because just being there on the day and being able to be at peace, being able to zone into the show, being able to trust the people that are around you to sort of to know like, okay, cool. If I'm here and something's going down, I don't need to worry about it because I know Kai's going to sort it out, or I know like, cool, if there's any problems, like he's going to deal with it. And I think, even just simple things like at the end of the show, when we're packing down and just being able to just talk normally and just to make banter and just like have normal conversations, getting a good hug at the end of the show, which Malachi is sound for every time.
Debatable.
That's a lot. Well, boy, he be doing you dirty.
Wow.
But just I think simple things like that as well, because there's nothing that I've created that I can say is purely done on my own. Even if I think of, okay, I've written a poem, 9 times out of 10 I've asked someone to read it to give me feedback. I never feel like, okay, I've done this by myself or I need to do this alone. I think there's this idea that as an artist we do things on our own, or me, Jeremiah, exists as an artist and everything that I produce is me, mine. I have done it, which to an extent is true, but I've not done it alone. I think that's one way that I protect myself as well, is not feeling the need to have that responsibility that it's just me. I think the more I can get used to saying we, the easier it becomes to be an artist.
When it comes to protecting myself, I think the thing that I need to protect myself from is almost myself. I think for me, it really comes down to having a sense of self-acceptance, for accepting who I am and what I am beyond the creation of my art, but for actually a level of self-love. And I'm not the best at doing it, but I have to find within myself a feeling that it's okay to say those things, or it's okay to feel those things, or it's okay to move towards those directions. So for me, it comes down to self-acceptance and understanding that the feelings I have are normal. And also, I find love makes me feel better about things, like loads of smiles and loads of hugs and loads of like warmth towards other people. That protects me from myself, because it shows me that people can see you within your darkest, most vulnerable experiences and still want to be with you. And in that sense, it restores a faith in humanity.
You guys have dropped so many gems today anyway, but if you could give our listeners one piece of advice, and it doesn't have to be about trauma or performing, it could just be life. You know, we all need a bit of that life advice. So any one piece of advice that you could give our listeners, what would that be?
Advice for the listeners. Are you listening?
Sound like you're about to drop a poem.
Yeah.
Listen. Inside.
Inside.
Love your elders, love your people, love yourself.
Share your hunger and bleed with people.
Practice compassion. Treat yourself like you would a loved one.
Malachi, want to drop a gem?
No.
Jeremiah, do you want to sign out?
Yeah.
Is this legitimate?
I think you should do it with your Smooth FM
With my
voice.
Smooth FM voice.
Yeah.
I'd like to thank all of my guests, Rumi Woolf, Jeremiah SugarJ Brown and Louisa Robbin,
for joining us on episode 4 of Tell Dem. If you've enjoyed listening today,
let us know what you liked, and if you hated it, complain to the Arts Council that we're wasting public money.
I've been Tobi Kyeremateng, you've been lit.
Thank you for listening to Tell Dem.
Shout.